Welcome, everyone. Thanks. My name is Jesse Magano, pronoun he, him. I'm the Senior IT Director over at Disability Rights California. I've been with DRC for 24 years, and I've been in IT for over 30. I was a computer science major, studied ethical hacking and computer hacking forensics investigation with the EC Council, and I have an advanced cybersecurity expert certification through Stanford. A little bit about me. I have 2 dogs and 3 kids, and I live in Sacramento, California. All right. Well, thanks for joining. So today's presentation is about cybersecurity. We want to talk about kind of how cyber criminals, are looking to compromise our data, compromise your data. They have a lot of different style threats. Now that it's 2025. One of the things that we have to be aware of is without the understanding of what cyber criminals are looking for, then we don't know how to kind of defend ourselves. So that's one of the things we're going to be going over is what are they looking for, how to avoid the risks. And one of the main things is making the right decision every time we're kind of using our computers, or every time we're sending email. So we want to protect that data. Today in this presentation, this is actually a presentation that I use for Disability Rights California. I'm going to frame it a little bit different because I think we have some different audiences. So with one of the audiences, you have to protect the organization as a whole. There's some accountability. What do you have in place? What type of security do you have in place? What type of trainings do you have in place? If you're, then you're also a user. You use your computer regardless of your position, and you can fall victim to a threat. So we have to look at it in that way. And then in another way is we manage people, and when we're managing people, we have to make sure that they're doing encryption right, they're reviewing emails correctly. When they're doing their Google searches and they're looking for information, they're not falling victim to malicious sites. So I'm gonna frame it a little bit different. When we're doing it, or I'm doing it for the organization, it's for the for the organization, for our users, to protect kind of the information that we have. So it'll be the same presentation, but I'll try to fill in where it might be kind of like an avenue where you might look at if you're maybe management, or maybe the CEO, or maybe just the user, like the different perspectives, because we all have a different perspective when it comes to cybersecurity. So a couple of the topics: electronic threats, social engineering, that is a big one. Phishing, we're all, there are so many phishing threats through email, passwords, safeguards, communication. I do a little bit on acceptable use. I think if you're in management, acceptable use of the computer, you have to make sure that staff are using those devices correctly, and a little bit of social media risks. So this is lined up in a way. So at DRC, our state contract requires that we have privacy and information security trainings. And this was implemented years ago. And then also with our cyber liability insurance, providing these trainings. So this is part of the trainings that, and kind of they have a template of what are you training your staff on, and what are the areas that you need to address. So this is kind of where this was generated from. So state contract, federal contracts, and cyber liability insurance. So the first thing I want to go over before I jump into electronic threats, the thing we have to think about too with our information is we all have access to client confidential information. Confidentiality of our client information, consumer information, is key. And then also with that, with the grants that we have, the funding that we have there's an integrity to that funding, and to the clients there's an integrity. If a data breach happens, if a security incident happens, or if there's a data exposure by sending somebody the wrong email, the wrong client receives somebody else's information, the integrity could be affected. And then the other thing that we have to think about is the availability. If if your email system is compromised and an email goes out and one of your user accounts, say they were had an account takeover, that's when a hacker takes over the account, gets into the email, and then sends an email, just a spam out to hundreds of people. What that does sometimes is that will make it so other email servers will not trust your domain, will not trust your email server. So that will reduce the availability. At Disability Rights, the availability, if we had to take down an internal server. We have multiple programs at Disability Rights. So if one of the programs needed to get out some case information or communicate with clients, but someone else in another program, they fell victim, and then we had to do a forensics on that server, and we had to take that server down. That means the availability of that system will not be down. That means that there's administrative staff working, there's IT staff working, there's communication to other people that you work with outside of the organization. So those three things, we have to put them together. We have to keep everything confidential. We have to keep the integrity of our organizations. And then we want to make sure that all of the data that we have is readily available. When these things start falling apart and we can't complete our daily jobs, and we're trying to play catch up, and then we're also sending out communications on how we're getting back online. So those are some key aspects. And one of these aspects too that we have to think about in IT, and if you have IT departments, the availability and the security sometimes don't always come together in the right kind of alignment. You can make things very available, very easy to use. That means you have relaxed security. You don't have MFA. You don't have secure devices. You're not doing health checks. But if you have really, really strong security, then that means it's really hard to use your system. So in IT and with leadership, you have to have a balance of what can you put at risk. So those are the things too you want to think about with your organization. Is some of my staff are like, we want it super secure. Then we have to think about, okay, well, what does that mean if scenario B happens or scenario A happens? What type of level of support do we have? So you have to balance those things out when it comes to cybersecurity, at a server level, at a cloud level, at a management level. So those are the things I understand. Those are some of the things we can go over. It's some of the pain points that we went through at DRC. But as we move forward, what we're noticing is staff become more accustomed to having secure devices, to having multi-factor authentication, multiple means of making sure that they do identity checking, and that takes a team effort. It takes an organization effort. So cybersecurity isn't just one IT team, or the CEO or the manager, someone in leadership, or the CFO. Like, hey, we need to do these things. Those decisions are made, but then everyone in your organization should be like, yeah, you know what? Our key piece to this is making sure that we keep. I'm just going to scroll real quick. Our confidentiality, integrity, and availability ready for our organization, even though it might take 5 minutes longer to send an email, a couple minutes longer to to double check a link or send it in for phishing to make sure that it's legitimate information. Sometimes taking that time out will save you time in the long run, if that makes any sense. So far, any questions? No? Awesome. Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Just kind of, setting some core baseline right there. Electronic threats. So electronic threats, they come in all types of means now. Back in the day, like, you CD-ROM and thumb drives and hyperlinks. All these threats come in. They in text messages. They're in PDFs. They're in fake Zoom links, fake OneDrive links. They're just everywhere. And part of what this training does is They want you to be, I want you to be able to analyze, like, okay, am I, is this normal? Is my computer acting normal? I went to a website and, I clicked on a couple of things and, I was 5 pages into a Google search, and now my computer is behaving differently, or now my homepage is behaving differently. Something's changed on my computer. Computers are very, very binary. Unless you're running a Windows update, it's usually on or off, and it works. Unless there's some type of change, new keyboard, new mouse, an update on a system. So you have to be aware of that, and then you also have to be aware of every action. Sometimes there's a reaction. So you open up an email, reading through it, you're like, oh, that kind of looks interesting. There's a download this file. It looks like something I'm working on. You're not sure. And you click through it. And then after that, 10, 15 minutes later, you start to notice something different. That should heighten your senses. You're like, okay, I listened to Jesse's training and I went through a couple of steps, it was sort of routine, and now my computer is behaving differently. Now I'm receiving these emails. Now my Google searches are different. Those are some of the things where you need to react quickly. So the reason we want you to react quickly, or you should react quickly, is these cyber criminals, they script things and they do things very fast. So once they get a hold of your system, then what they're able to do is start to escalate their process, gain more access, you know, gain access to your contacts, script messages in your Outlook or OWA, and then create rules. And they're doing this very quickly. So reaction time. So if something happens and you wait a day or 2 days, that's given them a whole range of time to create, more actions, more malicious things with your system, with your account. So electronic threats, they're everywhere. A couple of signs, your computer is acting weird. You get pop-ups, firewall pop-up. Just look out for those. And those sometimes we call them are drive-by downloads. You're out on the Google and you're searching, and you happen to, just hit something, and it could look like real site. Remember, these hackers are smart. They're using AI to create websites. They're using AI to create emails. They're using AI for all types. They're using AI to respond back to you. So just be aware that they have a lot of tools now, and they're relentless. I'll kind of tell you, so that, like, cyber criminals, so I wake up, our staff wake up, and we get to work, and we help support, and we advocate for our clients, and we do our tasks. Some people are in the IT departments, HR, some people are attorneys, litigation counsel. We all have a specific job to do. Some of these cyber criminals, they literally wake up to compromise databases, to do phishing attacks, to put out their scripts to as many thousands of people that they can, and they get that information and they sell it on the dark web. Like, that is their job, and there's teams of them doing it. So we're waking up every day to advocate and support. And some of these people are, and some of these teams are, they're late at night, they're getting everything ready so that they can launch attacks, and they sell them. So they might not make a lot of money on, say, a database that they compromise from your organization, or say it's a email script, but over time they start to accumulate because it's the mass amount of people that they're affecting in the world. And then sometimes that data will get resold. Now they have your email address, they have maybe some PII, that they've gotten from you, and then they'll resell that. So you have to just be aware that it's multiple teams, they feel like it's their job. People do pay them for this information. It's a $1 trillion business. Cyber criminals, they have a $1 trillion business. That's why there's such a big infrastructure trying to fight them off. And one of the best ways to fight them off is all of us. At DRC, have intrusion prevention. we have multi-factor authentication, we have VPNs, we use encryption, we have Azure services, we have hunting. We can have all these things surrounding to protect the house from burning down. But cyber criminals know that it only takes one person to light a match from the inside. And so that's why our best defense in IT is you all. So if you're, every day you're in front of your computer, you're like, okay, I'm reading my email, I'm doing my job, I'm going to these specific websites, and you're aware of this information. You're like, okay, I'm not going to be, fall victim to a phishing scam or to a drive-by download or some type of attack. So we're the best defense when it comes to this because the cyber criminals know that IT is putting a lot around them. Really hard to hack into some of these things. They don't go through the front door. They're coming to us, and then they've come from us, from one of us. They're like, hey, and then they'll skip. The CIA was actually hacked because it went from like one university and then a university in California, and that person in California, they happened to be a friend or associate with someone in the CIA, and then that phishing scam got into that into that unit, and then they were able to kind of start to spread it through there. So they will do hop, skip, jump to get to a destination. So that kind of leads me. Any questions on that?
Yeah, we have a question in the Q&A. Hannah's asking, are there any concerns about using staff's personal cell phones, for example, as a part of an MFA process?
No, actually, so at DRC, if you're using MFA, so I will tell you something that we've learned with MFA. So to answer your question, personal cell phone to MFA, that is fine. But you want to make sure that if you're using your personal cell phone, or they're using their personal cell phone to MFA, it's not like they're, like, oh, hey, their son or their friend or somebody's using that phone. You want to secure that device because now that device, you're utilizing it for, your identity check. So you want to make sure that you're not just giving that device out. If somebody's like using MFA, like, oh, I put it on my iPad, and then my kid uses my iPad. You want to be really careful once you incorporate that device into your organization. So there are a couple of things that we're doing at DRC to kind of to look at bring my or BYOD or bring your own device. But right at this point, you know, we've changed the MFA. So I don't know if you all MFA with Microsoft Authenticator or Google Authenticator, but we moved over to text-based and call-based MFA only. So one thing that we've learned about cyber criminals, they are able to, you have your MFA device, your Apple or your Android, and that device is there. And then say you fall for a phishing scam and your username and password has been taken, and then they get your MFA and you get a code and you accidentally approve the code with your MFA. Then what they're able to do is get their own iPhone, their own Android or something that they have, and apply those MFA credentials, and then they have control of your MFA. So at DRC, what we found out is they can't control. It's very hard for them to control your phone number, your text number. They can do SIM card hacking, and there's a whole bunch of different ways, but they're trying to do the easiest attack. So our staff, yes, they use their personal devices to MFA, and then we've also turned off the Google Authenticator, the Microsoft Authenticator, and all those other app authenticators because they're hackable. So hopefully that answers your question. All right. Social engineering. So kind of went over it. I think it's been around forever. Fake mail, probably on the fax machine, social engineering, um, Morse code, social engineering. It's probably been around forever. Social engineering, it comes in, the most social engineering that we see and that you're probably going to see is through email or text. You might, depending on how you interact with social media, you're definitely going to see it there. And then, but they'll send you emails, And what they're able to do, what they've found out. So we have email virus scanners. We have all types of email scanning for malicious email. It gets all scanned. But these cyber criminals, they're smart. They'll put a simple subject in the thing like need to talk, right? Some very simple, have time later. And then in the body of the email, they'll put something like, when you have a sec, get back to me. And then they'll put a signature in there. And they're smart. So they look at LinkedIn, they look at Facebook, they look at all of social media, they know who works where. They'll put your executive director signature in there. They'll come up with something that they think is relevant like that, and then they'll kind of sign it as them. And they can use Jesse Magano or my executive director in the from line, but have a different email address. And the way that they composed their email was very simple. When it comes to the mail server says there's no attachments, there's no language that says it's sales. There's no links that are malicious. So our virus scanner has to say, hey, you know what? There's nothing on the front of this that looks like it's an attack at a technical level. And when I emphasize that at a technical level. So then you see it, right? And you're kind of, hanging out, and maybe you're on your phone, you're on your cell phone, and you're looking at it, and you're like, oh, look, Andy, my executive director just says we want to talk. He wants to talk a little later, and then I reply. I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm just having lunch. I'll get back to you, right? And then they'll say, oh, look, he fell for the first phishing attempt. We got him kind of hooked a little bit. And then they'll respond and say, "Oh yeah, you know what? We're going to have a party, or we're going to have an event, and it was impromptu, and we need some, I don't know, some Amazon gift cards or some iTunes gift cards, or something. We need some gift cards, electronic gift cards." And then I'm like, "Oh well, yeah," and they're like, "I don't have time to pick them up." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's great. I can do it electronically, and I can send them to you, or I can, run over to the store and purchase them." And then they have you the next phase, and then they go into the next phase. Then all they're asking for at that point is, what are the electronic codes? Because I just need the codes, because I'll just give the codes to, all of the, people we're going to congratulate. And that might sound very strange. Like, how would somebody receive a small little email, respond to it, and then get kind of, lured into using their corporate card or their personal credit card to purchase something? Sounds odd, right? No, it happens. It happens all the time because people trust. They're not paying attention. Sometimes in IT, we're just like, yeah, they must have been on autopilot because they're not, looking. They're like, why? Okay, for one thing, why would Andy, his signature looked a little weird. Well, why would my executive director say this? He doesn't really write like that. Um, you know, I look at his email address. I'm like, why would he be emailing from their Gmail? That is strange. And then they're asking about money, and you're like, okay, well, I know there has to be accounting processes for making purchases. We have accounting processes. Like, yeah, none of this lines up. And so what you would think to yourself is, okay, well, those don't line up. So what we ask our staff to do is say, if you receive something from somebody internally or somebody that put that email to the side, write a new email to them. You make sure it's to them. You got it all lined up, and ask them, hey, did you mean to send me a text earlier about getting some gift cards? And you'll get a response from them. Or if you're using Teams or Zoom or Slack or whatever you're using, you send them an IM saying, hey, I just got a weird text. It says that you needed some, and start communicating with that person directly. Don't communicate with the cyber criminal, because they're doing this, over and over and over again. So just be aware, like that's, it sounds odd that someone would give them $1,000 worth of electronic gift cards, but it's happened. It happens all the time. You can get social engineering. Your staff can get social engineering attempts through the phone. So, I think SSA, and there's a lot of a lot of organizations, government organizations, where they're like, hey, scam alert, they're trying to pretend to be us. So be aware, they will call you and pretend to be someone. At that point, you need to say, okay, well, I need your contact information, I need your manager information, I need to verify who you are. I'm not just working with you directly, because there's so many scammers. Always be on alert. Just be on alert that it can be a scam. And then there might be people like, I'm honestly, I call it, there's an overdue bill. I know it might sound weird, but have your heightened senses up. Your staff should have heightened senses up, because they will call, they will text, they will send an email, they will contact you over social media. And they've been doing this for years in all shapes and sizes. So just be aware that and some of the social engineering threats, they're more complex too. And I'll go into that with the phishing threats. Or any questions on social engineering, or what to look out for, or how to respond to it? Okay, just be aware. They use LinkedIn and your profile against you. They use your job title and what you're doing against you. They're not just, sending something out to you randomly. They're like, okay, this person's, maybe a support person. I'm gonna attempt to, trick them with something that, they have a whole queue of things. Like, these are things that you can use to trick, someone that's a legal secretary, or an attorney. They have that. They're not just sending stuff out like, a long time ago in the 2000s. They have engineered social engineering, information specifically based on, a lot of, job and demographic information. So they're very smart, and they have a lot of tools. So phishing, that's probably, that's one that was one of the biggest kind of things that's always been going on. It's in injunction, it goes in kind of in line with phishing. So the phishing threats, it's that, the sending you an email and trying to hook you, kind of sending you an email saying, hey, here's a document to review. Sending you something that has an attachment in it. The phishing threats that I feel like are the most successful are phishing threats that come from people people you work with, or depending on the size of your organization, internal staff. Those phishing threats, those are the ones that on the IT side, those are the ones that we go into all, code red at that point if a phishing threat comes from a trusted known source. So you might ask, well, how is a phishing threat going to come from an internal person, or from somebody that I work with all the time? That's what we call an account takeover. So the account takeovers are when, person A falls for the phishing threat somehow. They are sent a document or a link, and it says, to proceed, follow this link. And then what it'll do is it'll take them to a 365 page. Cybercriminals know that Microsoft kind of owns this, everything we're doing. A lot of people are in the cloud for, 365, and they create these 365 pages that look real. They look like the three Microsoft sites, and the user doesn't check the URL. The URL doesn't say Microsoft.com. It doesn't have the SSL security certificate in the corner with, it's all green, like this is a trusted site. They're just looking at the page. They look at the page, they're like, that looks like a 365 login. type in the username, type in the password. What will happen is they get that username and password, and sometimes they won't allow you, it will say invalid. And you'll type in like, man, I think that's right. And they'll type it again. And maybe it's a second password. They have that second password from you in your username. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll let you in. They don't even care what your username and password is, but they still log that username and password. Then at that point, they have that piece of your identity. So they have that, they had your email, they know where you sent to, they know where you clicked it on, they know what site you went to, they have your username, they have your password, they have this whole tracking on you. And then they'll do the MFA code. They'll try to get you to trick you to do an MFA code, and send that to you and try to get you to put it into that site. And at that point, once they have your MFA code, then they can do basically whatever they want, because then they can put that code into a mobile device, into OA, into an Outlook client, and then they could start pretending to be you. So once they pretend to be a person, so they've gotten through the first security layer, username and password, they've gotten through the second security layer of your MFA, your identity check. If you do not have identity checking on in your organization, tomorrow, next week, whatever in your initiatives, you need to turn that on. Username and passwords are very easy to hack. So now they have that, they're in your account. Now what this hacker is doing with person A, they go through their email, they script it, they get their contacts, and they send that same malicious email to everyone that you know. Everyone. Say you have your distribution list and it says all staff. Say you have multiple distribution lists. Say you work with the legislation here in California, sending it to those. They're sending it to everyone, and then they repeat that and they repeat that and they repeat that, until they get what they want. So when a phishing threat comes in, you're like, oh, hey, I work with Jane. We're in the same one of the same committees. And then you're automatically thinking, oh, let's check. I want to read what Jane has to say because I work with Jane. Um, and that's how they get you to just lower your guard a little bit instead of thinking like, why is Jane sending me something about an invoice, or why is she sending me something about some program or a project that I've never even heard of. This seems weird. You have to heighten your sense, be aware. You're like, okay, there could be a chance that Jane sent it to the wrong person. No, I wasn't there, not intended to receive this. Or maybe Jane's account was taken over and a hacker has control of her email. You start thinking about that and you're like, okay, went to the cybersecurity training. This looks odd. I know I trust Jane, but let me reach out to Jane. Let me send him an IM. Let me, contact start a fresh new email. And if you have an IT team, then, and if you have phishing that you can report phishing, that's what we do. We have a phishing button. Or, some of our staff just IMS directly and say, hey, I just got a weird email, from this person, and this doesn't look right. And then we investigate it. If you don't have an IT team to investigate it, then you have to have something in place because these are going to happen. You want to be aware. You're like, okay, what we do at DRC, so we get a malicious email, we scan it, we run it, we call it sandboxing it. We take and we're like, okay, let's double check this. And then when we sandbox it and we take it into one of our systems, what I'm looking for is the level of threat. And so if the level of threat is just kind of like fishing around to get more information, I'm like, okay, we can respond to it pretty quickly, let people know to delete it. And then, but if we find out it's malicious, they're trying to steal username and passwords, or put some type of malware on the system, then at that point, we're informing the staff, we're doing threat hunting, going and telling Exchange this exact thing, remove it from the inboxes, and then we block that email address, or we lock down that user's account. So if the user is, they're like, hey, something happened to my account. If it's external, we block them. If it's internal, we lock them up. Dry throat. Hold on 1 second. I need a cough again. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. So just be aware that even though you trust the person, their account can take over. And then you have to put in security measures after that. So security measures after are your IT team should change that username and password, should review their email, look to see to the extent of the attack, and then also double check their MFA and the devices that are associated to it. Sometimes the user, if it's an internal user, they're not working for an hour, 2 hours. Then we're scanning their computer. You have to do everything in place, put everything in place so that you're confident, your IT team's confident, like, look, we double checked their email, we saw the threat, the threat went out to 300 people. Someone probably needs to communicate with these 300 people that they received a malicious email. We kind of basically deleted it internally. We had staff delete it manually, and then we went through and did some scripting in Exchange or Outlook or whatever email system, and we had it removed. And you want to eliminate that, and then you also want to inform the user this is how it happened. So what we do is we do a follow-up call and say, okay, what did you do, or what email did you interact with, or when do you think you received this? And they kind of walk them through so that we can understand, because threats change. So in our IT department, we know that, threat today will be one thing, but it could be something else a month from now. We have to understand any security incident. We have to be able to understand that and say, hey, they're changing their strategies. They've always been changing their strategies. I mentioned earlier, I've been with DRC for 24 years, but I've been IT for 30, and all these things, some of them are the same, but a lot of them have they've gotten better. So be careful, be aware, look at emails, like when I see spam, I'm just like, I don't have time for spam. My day is so busy, I just delete it. If I get a lot of spam from a certain place, I just right click and say junk. I don't want to see that anymore. And then if I receive an email from somebody that I'm interacting with, I look, I'm making sure that email, is something that I'm expecting. And if it's an internal person, so always kind of look at it, because you want to remember, you want to be able to take a little time today or in that moment, so you're not spending hours down the road. Now your computer, you can't even access your computer, phone, reset your phone. You're supposed to get something done for a project, and you're just like, yeah, I got hacked. I can't, my computer's off limits. That you don't want that to happen. And then, that point, sometimes what will happen is, depending on who you send it to, they will block your email. We've blocked emails for a week or two until their IT team came back and said, "Hey, we've cleaned everything out, and we're their account is fine to have them sending email back and forth between our two systems." So just image of a fake bank, they do that too. Like I mentioned earlier, they create fake bank websites, 365 websites. Those are the ones you want to be aware of, the 365 websites, because they could even put another company's logo on it and say it's a SharePoint. A lot of companies use SharePoint, and they could send you a fake SharePoint link, grab the logo from the company, put it in the 365. So you think you're really logging into Disability Rights California just because it has a logo, but you're not looking at the URL. It doesn't say disability rights ca.sharepoint.com. It just says something else. You're like, yeah, that looks kind of suspicious. Let me make sure that they intended on sending me this link. I want to verify that. Do a lot of verification. Any questions on that?
We just have one from Jim. He asked if you have any model employee policies that you could share.
Hold on, let me turn this up really quickly. It's kind of
Sorry, I can speak louder. Jim asks if you have any model employee policies that you could share.
model employee policies.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that? Like, what does a model employee do to not get hacked? I'm not looking at the Q&A. Let me see if I can bring that up. Yeah, I don't have the Q&A, and is it?
He added guidelines and handbook for employees.
Oh, okay. So, so we have, so we do these security trainings 4 times a year, and then we have our privacy policy and information IT policies. That we give the new staff. Now, do we have like a guidebook on how to kind of interact with cyber criminal or with phishing? We do not. There's because it's so dynamic. We have policies on on how to use your computer, on encryption, when to encrypt, what is encrypted on your laptop, encryption. We have policies on the expectation of safe use, and there's a lot of policies that we have regarding IT and IT infrastructure, and then policies on what happens if there's a data breach. Um, but do we have something specifically like a handbook to keep yourself safe? We actually don't. So what we do is we just try to provide as much training as possible. We have tools in place that help us with this. Our virus scanning, our spam scanning. We have report phishing. Our IT department is online every day from 8:30 to 5 p.m. We look at requests, we take ticket requests. A lot of this is dynamic, so um, there isn't anything that I could write today that would probably be valid, in a few months, because a lot of different things change. One of the policies is if your laptop is lost or stolen, you have to inform us. If you uh, send out an email to the wrong recipient with confidential information, that has to be reported. A lot of data breach, scenarios need to be reported. Um, so um, hopefully that answers your question. Sounds good. It'd be nice to have a handy dandy handbook on it, and people would actually go through it and read it. But yeah, and then we have all staff trainings too, monthly. And sometimes I do security updates, just constantly. And then we do team meetings with staff, and we work with practice groups. And we send out email IT updates and reminders about IT security. We try not to desensitize them by it, but also inform them. All right. All right. Password guidelines. This is, so when it comes to passwords, one thing that will keep you safe from cybersecurity, criminals is a nice, long, complex password. You know, that that helps kind of guard off brute force attacks. What a brute force attack is like a dictionary attack on your username and password. They still use that, but MFA sort of kind of stops that a little bit. But the thing you need to know about passwords is, in our life, in your staff's lives, they have the 365 password, right? You have your maybe there's a password to a software, a database server or service that you use, an application, web application that you use, or maybe it's a password to benefits or something. We have so many passwords. Then you start having the Netflix password, the Hulu password, your Gmail password, your bank account password, retirement password, right? People are trying to remember all these passwords, And what you want to make sure that your staff do not do, we've had this happen, is they blended their password. Their work password is the same as some of their life passwords. We do not want, you do not want that to happen. We've had an incident where someone's Gmail account was hacked, and then they got on the phone on the IM email like, hey, my Gmail account was hacked. And we're like, okay, that's your Gmail account. They're like, no, my Gmail password is my work password. And then so we had to shut down their account, lock everything up, run a security scan, look at files that they use, look at anything, be like, okay, it says the last time you logged in was at 11:30. You reported this at this time. There's been no activity since we shut down. There was no activity before that. We're like, okay, so the hackers didn't come to your work account. They only were looking through your Gmail. Um, so you just want to make sure that your staff are not blending passwords. So in my life, I have like very secure passwords. I have DRC passwords. I have, maybe some general generic passwords, like that my kids are using for like Netflix or Disney Plus, and they're logging in, and that's a whole other thing, not even similar to what my passwords are. And you want to make sure your organization has a complex password requirements. You want to make sure that's happening. You want to make sure, at least 8 characters, alphanumeric with a special character in there. So you want to make them complex. There could be times when, you're maybe you're using your laptop, right? And you're out and about, maybe you're at a conference and you're using your password and you're typing your password, and maybe someone could be watching. It kind of goes back to social engineering. Sometimes, they will be looking, people have phones now. You have your phone and you can basically zoom in and record from like 50 feet away. Like, the iPhone 16, and then they're recording your keystrokes. So you want to make it complex, because you don't want to fall victim to that. And you want to make sure you have password guidelines. Right now, for the majority of our login, it's 180 days. Some of our applications, it's even sooner than that. 60 days. Because you want to keep those things rotating just in case someone has that password. And when someone has your password and they're able to log in, sometimes these threats, what you might notice, is a threat comes in, your account takeover happens, or your password has been compromised, and you don't know. You have no slightest idea. You didn't see an MFA request, nothing. They have your password. We call that camping, and they'll kind of camp on your account and wait until it's the right time for them. Maybe wait till like yesterday, Tuesday, after a 3-day weekend, everybody's coming back. They're like, yeah, I just came back, I'm kind of tired, and then they'll send the attack out then. Or maybe it's right before Christmas. They'll look for opportune times to take advantage. Not like Saturday night at 2 a.m. or something, some weird, you're like, well, this, I know this wasn't me. This is not. So they use different strategies, they use, different techniques. So make sure you don't password blend. Your staff do not have the same password as your work password in their personal life. And then on a personal note, make sure your passwords, for super secure, your bank account, your retirement, investment accounts, that's kind of one realm. And then, maybe some other things that you use to log in, your personal devices, security cameras and whatnot, keep those separate. So that, because what you don't want to have is that one key to rule them all, and all of this like falls like dominoes, all your accounts, bing, 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 because they're able to get into your Gmail, get into your bank account. Bank account sends you a verification code. It's in your Gmail. They have access to your Gmail. Now they're in the bank account. Then they go in the bank account, add another wire transfer, transfer money. So keep those passwords separate. So you put some barriers up. All right. Any questions on that?
Someone asked about your thoughts on password managers.
We use LastPass. So we use LastPass. I know Apple has a strong password manager. I'm at Android and has a password manager for passwords on here. But for like my team, we use LastPass, and then a couple other teams they use that. So um, it's a nice app. I haven't really used any other besides I have Microsoft Security on my laptops and desktops, and so that has a security manager, so that's encrypted. My Android device has it. But if you're looking for something that's web-based, that your team can use, that you're using like a shared password model with different levels of security, LastPass is nice. And it uses great encryption. Um, and
Does
if you, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and if anyone has questions or has, wants advice or needs like, just like information, hey, now I'm looking at this, like this application, like, what do you think of it? I don't know if my contact information is in the Zoom or in the calendar slip, but I think we can share it at the end, my email address. And I'll, kind of, you know, give you some advice on some of that too, because one of the reasons I'm doing the training too is so, disability rights, we work with a lot of people in California. And what we feel like is the more information that our other legal aid organizations have on cybersecurity, that makes it so that as a group, we have more knowledge so that we're preventing these cyber criminals from infiltrating one of the legal aid organizations to get to another. So I'm open to people asking me questions. I might think it's spam. I might email you on the side, see if it's a phishing attempt, put it to the ringer. But yeah, no, any questions, follow up questions, I can answer offline too. All right. Was there anything else out there? Any other questions?
You kind of already answered this one, but someone else said from an accommodation standpoint, how do you recommend that a staff practically remember their passwords if pure memorization is too difficult, especially if we continuously expect to change them? Would it be writing them down or save to a password manager?
Yeah, so what we do at that point, so if it's on your Windows computer, then we're definitely going to install a safe application, maybe with some autofill and make sure that that's, and then make sure that that device is the only device that, or the trusted device can use that password manager. So at DRC, we have staff that use facial recognition to log in, because at the login screen, they can't, the keyboard, and they can't use the keyboard. So and then once they get into Windows, then it's, more accessible to. So we use facial recognition. There are ways that your IT team can implement different password managers within your web browsers. So, but you want to keep your web browsers secure. So, you know, what we have to do as an organization, what we do at Disability Rights too, is we take every disability, every kind of instance of what a staff member needs, and we try to remember back at the beginning, it was balancing security and availability. So we've had instances where there were security measures that we couldn't apply because the way that the software interacted with the computer made it so that it didn't work properly. So we had to lower the security on certain systems and then understand it, and then work with the user and saying, hey, we're putting a password filler. We're using this application, and then these are the passwords that we're going to be saving in here. We're not going to be saving, your Amazon account or anything like that. This is a bank of passwords, and we'll work with them so that we can still keep it secure, make sure that it has, a way to interact with the site, because passwords are hard to remember. So, but you have to, your IT team or your reasonable accommodation specialist. There's a lot of solutions out there. It's just like, it's not always no. It's sometimes, well, let's see what solutions are out, making sure that we're because the staff need to work. That's the key thing. Staff need to work. Staff need to fulfill their tasks. They need to, everybody needs to do their job. We also have to have IT security on the side, so we have to, like, you know go through those. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but each scenario is different. So hopefully to answer your question, password, the secure password application, sometimes we have to buy things. We have to buy something and say, hey, you know what, we have to make a purchase. This is the encryption it has. This is kind of the features it has. This is what it's going to be used for. And this is the scenario that we're going to run it in for this person. And then, everyone's been able to get back to business, get back to work. So anything else?
No, that was it.
All right. So what your organization should have is some type of electronic safeguards. At a desktop, laptop level, you want to have password save. I mean, you want to look at that, what people are doing. You want to make sure that people are with their virus scanner, they're definitely running their Windows updates. Windows will pop up and say, Windows update, and then it's like, nah, I'm not gonna do it. And then it's like a week later, and then a week later, and then the computer starts acting weird. You want people restarting. We got to restart your computer. We tell our staff, Friday, if you can, restart your computer at the end of the day. After you're done with, whatever administrative work you have to wrap up, and then log back in, make sure everything's good, so that Monday you can log back in, you have a 9 a.m. Zoom, and you jump in the meeting, and everything's well. If you're holding back these security updates from Windows, those patches are having a reason. There's an intention for those passwords. I mean, for those security patches. So you want to make sure your staff patch them. If you're, even you as a user of the computer, run your updates. If have a virus scanner that pops up and says, "Hey, there's an update available," and it's your virus scanner. Like we use FortiClient, we're like, that's FortiClient. We tell our staff too, or sometimes people will report FortiClient, a virus scanner, as a virus, and we'll let them know, hey, that's our. A lot of this is knowledge sharing. We're like, hey, no, that's just asking you to reboot. A patch was applied. You definitely want to do that. You want to make sure that maybe you're using a VPN and it's a safe, secure VPN. You want to make sure that your staff are using SSL web, sites that are secure sites, that have verified identity, so that you're not going to a website that is allowing like unsecured data to flow. So your web browsers need to be patched, Chrome needs to be patched. If you're using Adobe, that needs to be patched. Make sure you patch all these, all of your applications. You don't want that to just sit out there, for 6 months unpatched. So it's a lot of maintenance. Remember, your computer and your laptop, it's still a machine, it's still a device, and it still needs its maintenance, it needs its restarts. So make sure your staff take care of that. You take care of that also. Um, when you leave your desk, you should be locking your computer. So we have a security policy of inactivity. So if you're inactive on your computer, then in 20 minutes your computer is automatically going to lock. It was a little more relevant when we were in the office. Right now we all work from home. But even when you work from home, you still want to make sure, like, you get up, you're like, okay, I'm gonna grab some water, I'm gonna have some lunch. You want to lock your computer. Just make it a good habit to always lock your computer. If your company doesn't have a policy that on after 20 minutes of inactivity or 10 or whatever you feel, you look and say, hey, maybe we should lock these systems up. People are just leaving them idle. Let's put policy into, make sure their screens lock at least, because you don't want to walk away unintended. Because at that point, you know, someone can play around on your computer, or push a couple keyboards. You can even have a cat, walk across the keyboard and delete something, delete confidential information on one of your drive shares or out of OneDrive, something accidentally, or you're in a file and something happens and you're not aware, and it deletes the contents of the file, but it doesn't delete the file, and then you're like, oh, I have to do a restore. So be aware of that. Oh, yeah, make sure everyone's, let's see, that's about it. Just keep all your virus scanner updated, all of your systems updated. You know. All right. All right. Electronic communications kind of goes back into some of this is, kind of repeating. So electronic communications, it goes back into the cyber criminals, and what to kind of be aware of. Social media, um, there was a lot of different methods and misinformation, and ways to kind of trick you into, going to websites or, interacting with pages. So, um, if you're on your work computer, it goes back to blending too. So you want to be careful. So, you want to be careful what you do on your work system. Your staff need to be very careful. Like, okay, look, your laptop, it's designed to do this. This is your job. This is your job description. These are your, job expectations. These are your projects. And here's your system that we've given you to complete that. And you want to make sure, that what they're doing in their personal life doesn't affect their work computer and their data. So like with us, we have VPNs, we have OneDrive, we have SharePoint, we have Teams. If someone's using their system, it's going to go into point seven, and they're doing something on their personal system, on their personal time, they're taking a break, on Facebook and kind of searching the internet, but it's on their work system. They should be very careful with that. So we recommend staff, grab your phone, grab a tablet, use your laptop, something else, kind of keep those things separate. Because once you start getting very comfortable working from home, and when your staff get very comfortable from working from home, they want to like turn on Spotify, kick on YouTube, have an email up over here and a Word doc, and they're working away, and they have like kind of like personal things on their system. They got their work things going on, and then once you start getting really comfortable, you can make a mistake. Because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. These hackers are looking for you to make a mistake, kind of be on autopilot. It's Christmas time or some holiday time, and you're kind of looking, for stuff and you're shopping. You're checking your Gmail for like delivery, but you're on your personal system. They're looking for you to make a mistake, because there's other things going on in your life. So just be careful with the communications and blending what you're doing on your work system, your work passwords, everything with your work, and have your staff should have a barrier between that. Say, okay, we don't want to affect our clients. We don't want to affect our other staff. We don't want to affect our funding. I don't want to have to affect the IT department. And having to do a forensics, or they have to do a data restore. So that's what this is all about, is kind of keeping us kind of in alignment where we're like, okay, this is our job to do. We have things on the side that we can do, but we want to keep this, as structured as possible. And that goes into acceptable use. So what we do at DRC, so we have our systems, our laptop, and I mentioned we put virus scanner on there. We have backup data that we have on there. We have Microsoft 365 licenses that we give staff. There's Adobe editors. There's all this. There's a lot of different various jobs. So we take a lot of time and pride in putting together your laptop and your system, so you can work with your clients, with your staff, what you want, or your staff or yourself. You want to use that device what it's designed for. You want to make sure that if it's designed, and you're working in the accounting department, there's accounting software on there, or you're attorney and you have some Westlaw on there. You want to make sure you're using it for that, and you're not using it to create a Shopify account, or you're working for another law firm. You want to make sure your staff are using it properly, because it's expensive. So if you're not in the deployment piece or in the finance piece of the organization, or you don't these systems, we use Dells, they're very expensive, warranties are very expensive, licensing from Microsoft is very expensive. There's yearly charges, monthly charges, backing up data is very expensive. It's not free to have, these computers. So use them properly. Have your staff, you remind them, hey, when you're doing a new computer or a new onboarding, like, hey, here's your system. You make sure you use it for what it's intended for. Because you don't have to mention the price or the cost, but just let them know that there's an associated administrative, you know, tied to this. So not to use it for something that it's not intended for. So most people have a phone now or a tablet or something else that they can, surf the web on. So any questions on acceptable use? Any gray areas that you can think of? Is it okay to check your Gmail on a company laptop? Anybody answer that? Well, it is. You can check it. Like with us, we check our Gmail. You just don't want to overdo it. Over kind of just abuse kind of your what you're using it for. So, take breaks, take your lunch, and things like that. I don't really go into social media risks. Just be careful. Like, so at our organization, this is more of an HR kind of piece right here. If but it's part of the cyber liability. It's part of the training program to the state of California. One of the line items. So for social media risks, your organization has mission statement and values, and and they that's the organization as a whole. And then when it comes to social media, sometimes you can have different values and different ways that you look at things, and you're on social media. But what we ask, or um, what you want to be aware of, is sometimes those things can be conflicting, and if there is a conflict in kind of some of the information that you want to convey, but it's not in direct alignment with mission and the values of the organization, that's something that you might want to communicate to your supervisor or HR. I only have that in there because it's part of, just the training piece of for MCLE and all that, and for the cyber liability insurance. So, well, that's it for my training. And we have time for open mic Q&A if we want. Jocelyn, do we allow people to come off of mute, or we just wait for hands, or?
They can raise their hand if they want to go off of mute, or just use the Q&A function.
Okay. All right. I think that's it then.
Okay, I'll take it over. Thank you, Jesse.
All righty.